Hello out there to everyone at the liveactionanime.org forums. I am Thrashed and I just recently got back from a 2-week holiday in Florida. I had a great time there at all the parks and everything like that, but during my time there I was thinking of you guys a little bit, so I took an opportunity to get a film which hasn't hit UK shores yet. That film is Mamoru Oshii's The Skycrawlers. This film is set in a sort of alternative world to ours. It sort of has hints of an alternative World War II, it's sort of modern day, it's sort of futuristic, and it follows the conflict of two rival warfare companies who seem to be locked in perpetual conflict for control of the skies. And this war is conducted exclusively with children, which is to say late adolescents who never seem to reach adulthood and never die unless they're killed violently in battle. This follows the story of Yuichi, who is a new fighter pilot on a base of one of the warfare companies. And he's replacing an old pilot who apparently was killed, although his plane seems to be in suspiciously good condition. And as the film wears on, he becomes increasingly suspicious about the nature of this seemingly perpetual conflict and the death of the pilots before him. And every day seems to be sort of a repetition of the one before, and nothing ever seems to change, almost to the point of being suspicious. Now, The Skycrawlers, you have to understand, is a film that's definitely made for the sort of abstract crowd. The narrative and characters are more important for what they represent than sort of on their own terms. It's an existential parable first and a story second, I guess you might say. It explores all sorts of concepts about whether or not, if you're supposedly immortal and if every day is essentially the same as the last, and every sort of purpose in your life, every function you fulfill is orchestrated by some other power, can that really be called a life in the truest sense of the term? It's all sorts of concepts like that, stuff Mamoru Oshii's films usually sort of deal with, but in a more sort of indirect way than normal. There's no sort of soliloquies, there's no overt existential musing, it's all sort of subtext, and in that respect it's quite commendable for respecting its audience's intelligence. But understandably, the sort of pitch of Groundhog Day for the philosophically mature is kind of a hard sell. Thankfully though, Skycrawlers does have what it takes as a high-quality piece of entertainment as well. For one thing, Mamoru Oshii's direction hasn't been this sharp almost since the original Ghost in the Shell, and it forgoes a lot of the sort of excesses that were present in Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence and in his live-action project Avalon. Mamoru Oshii is one of the sort of directors who really understands animation as an art form. He understands that where live-action films sort of play with a sort of harmonious depiction of a reality, animation's appeal is derived more from the sort of dissonances with our sense of reality, and he warps it with that. He absolutely plays it like a flute. All the sort of shots just linger a little bit too long, all the characters seem to pause just a little bit too long in between lines, everything seems to be sort of still, and there's a sense of this sort of emptiness and hollowness that makes it a very sort of unnerving film to watch. There's a consistently uneasy atmosphere that, even though there's nothing overtly tense going on, there's still an incredible atmosphere of tension that sort of reels the audience in, makes them wonder what's really going on behind the scenes and what's really being said beyond the sort of overt. Also, Kenji Kawai's score, he usually works with Mamoru Oshii in sort of scoring his films. His score is absolutely gorgeous. There's this sort of running motif, a really haunting leitmotif that repeats itself throughout the film, and it really sort of captures the sort of air of timelessness that it evokes. It's a quite a slow film. There are action sequences in the form of dogfights that permeate the film to a reasonable extent, but most of those scenes are over fairly quickly, and they never seem to serve that much function within the narrative. They're more there as sort of filler than anything else, and if anything, it's more the scenes of domesticity that you're really there for. And some people might find that a bit dull, some people might find it a bit repetitious, although that's kind of the point. But if you stick with it, it's a very rewarding watch, and if you watch it to the end, there is definite substance there to back up all the sort of musing. With that said, it is a flawed endeavour. It's not Oshie's best, and that's largely because of the characters. While Yuichi and his love interest, Suito, are reasonably sympathetic characters, they're not all that interesting as human beings. Arguably, the sort of concepts that the characters represent in this film, this is sort of what I like to call Evangelion syndrome. Compelling characterization has sort of been sacrificed in the name of making a point on a philosophical level. And that's not really a sacrifice which needs to be or should be made. And it's one that Oshii really shouldn't have to do, because he's managed to pull it off before in films like Jinro and the original Ghost in the Shell. And so it is definitely an imperfect film. Also, one thing I didn't expect to have to pick on, but I will, is the animation, surprisingly enough. It's a Production IG production, and usually Production IG's technical merits are absolutely top of the range, that no one's as consistently solid as Production IG. But I have to take issue with sort of the stylistic decisions made in this film. It uses the sort of blend of 2D and 3D animation that's popular nowadays. You see it all over the place. But I'm not opposed to that in principle, but it's a balance that's quite hard to get right and still come across as presenting a sort of consistent style. And Skycrawlers just doesn't quite hit that balance for me. The 3D elements of the animation really seem to stick out. They don't seem really necessary, especially the sort of touches like doors opening are rendered in 3D against 2D backdrops and stuff like that. It's not really necessary, and I would have liked to see the dogfight sequences rendered in hand-drawn animation rather than CG, because I think that would have presented a more coherent vision of the world. But flawed though it may be, I think the Skycrawlers is a very commendable piece of work. It needs to be recognised for giving anime a sort of shot in the arm of art, in amongst all these shows about giant robots and hyperactive teenagers. So, and it's a very rewarding watch, and I thoroughly recommend anyone in the States to pick it up. And if you've got a multi-region DVD player in the UK, it may even be worth importing, because there doesn't seem to be any word of it being brought to these shores anytime in the foreseeable future. So yeah, definitely a very worthwhile watch. I give it, on the 4-star scale, 3.5 stars. That's a very high recommendation, although, as I say, it's not Oshii's best work. Well, I think that's me for now. I'm Thrashed All Death. Hope to see you again soon, and that's me out. Goodbye.